All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. My name is Chelsea Paggio. I'm very excited to have you all here. I'm the Assistant Director for Alumni Relations at Point Loma Nazarene University. And you're joining us for a series of Loma Talks that we've been doing throughout the summer. And we have been just learning some awesome things and engaging in great conversation with some of our alums. And they've just been bringing us their expertise. And so we're really excited to welcome Brian Frey and Jon Runion with us today. They are going to be also bringing us some really exciting discussion topics and just things to be thinking through and sharing their story. Brian is the pastor at Union Church in Arizona, Peoria, Arizona, and he will be, he is going to be sharing some of his journey through there, and Jon is also a worship pastor there and the manager of the coffee shop, Union Coffee Company, which is something that is connected to the church, but also has some really unique ways that they bring the community together. So we're going to be learning from them today, and I will let them introduce themselves more and get off of here in just a minute so that you can hear from them. But I just wanted to let you know a few things. The first is, if you look on the right-hand corner of your screen, there's speaker view, and that's going to be your optimal view to kind of hear today, so that you can see our speakers. The other thing, just to make sure you are all aware, we're recording this. So if you do have anybody who wants to see it after this, we'll make sure that it's up on our website later. And then finally, as we are going through, if you have anything that comes up, any questions you might have about the church, about the coffee shop, about anything that you want to hear from Brian and Jon, feel free to type that in the chat box and we'll be doing a Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and welcome them. We're really excited to hear from you guys. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
Good to be here.
Awesome. All right. So we have Brian or Jon want to start us off?
Oh, I'll start us off.
Okay.
I went to Point Loma from 2008 to 2013, and I studied social work. And I was pretty involved in like worship ministry stuff as far as like leading chapels and all that jazz. And yeah, it was fun. I loved my experience there. It was super good. That's what I was supposed to answer, right?
You're doing great.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm up, I guess. I went to Point Loma, graduated in 2001. Just turned 42 yesterday, so it was a long time ago. I actually played basketball at Point Loma, had a great time doing that. Was really not very involved in any ministry stuff at the time, but had some professors really ministering to me and just had an amazing experience with staff at Point Loma and friends too. So yeah, I wasn't a ministry major at Point Loma, I was a psych major. And I was thinking I was going to coach and counsel high school students. I was going to coach basketball, but the Lord had other things in mind after I graduated. So that's a little bit of my Point Loma stuff.
And we'd love to kind of hear through your journey of, I know, Brian, you were in Arizona previously and then moved back out there, and kind of the story behind Union Church and what brought you to start that church in Arizona.
Yeah, man, how do I do that in a short way? Here we go. Loved the time in San Diego. Ministry was very fruitful. My wife Kristen went through a cancer treatment season. She was stage 3C breast cancer, and went through the whole cycle of all that treatment. And at the end of that, just really felt like a change would be helpful, and a break for our family. And we have family and longtime friends in Arizona. So we decided to move after that season back to Arizona. And I took about, I don't know, maybe 3 months off. Wasn't working, Kristen wasn't working, and was just kind of praying, and I was interviewing at different churches. And my wife kept saying, "You're going to plant a church, you're going to plant a church." And I kept saying, "How? There's no way that's going to happen. What church is going to sponsor us? What does that look like? We're here by ourselves. Like, we're not planting a church. If we were going to plant a church, we should have done that in San Diego." And just kept praying and praying, and, you know, really felt like, you know, I was kind of late in the game on what the Lord was inviting us to. But I finally came around, and then invited Jon and Caitlin, who we had done ministry with in San Diego, if they would pray and consider doing a church plant in kind of a different way, because with Jon's expertise on the coffee side, that would enable us to do something maybe a little bit more unique, a different kind of church plant. And we didn't have a sponsoring church. And so just kind of wanted to be in the community in a different way, in a different aspect. And Jon and Kate prayed about it, and he can tell you his side of that. But they ended up coming, and then the ball really started rolling as far as, you know, what the Lord was inviting us to and what kind of church we might be. So that is kind of it in a nutshell. It was definitely begrudging. I was begrudgingly considering church planting because I didn't feel like we had the people or the resource, or I didn't feel like we had what we needed. And yet, you know, here we are, and the Lord's done a lot. And, you know, Jon is a huge, huge, huge part of that, Jon and Kate. So yeah. Are you guys there?
Sorry, I was talking, but I did the classic, I muted myself and forgot to unmute myself. So.
Oh, no, you're good. I was worried that whole thing was like to nobody because
no,
my wife.
You did great. You did great. I was actually halfway through a question, and then thank you for telling me that I was muted. So Jon, would love to hear from you as well, because I know that you and your wife, Caitlin, kind of made that journey out to Arizona from San Diego as well with Brian, and what that looks like, and kind of what you have worked on with worship leading, and then with the coffee shop as well. And I muted you, sorry.
No, you're okay. Am I unmuted? Yeah, okay.
You did, yes.
Well, I actually have known Brian since I was like in middle school. He was my like junior high youth pastor. So I had known Brian for like some time when I was younger, and then really started doing a lot more ministry with him when he moved to San Diego. And so like that kind of relationship started building again, like in a really healthy and good way. And so then when my wife and I were ready to look for another place to like be like, to get a new job somewhere. And so we were applying at other places as well, and kind of felt like the places that we were applying to just weren't the right fit. And so at that time I was working in coffee and at a church, and just feeling like we needed to do something new. And then Brian had moved to Arizona for like, I don't know, maybe like a half a year to a year before I moved out there. And when they came to that fact where they're like, we're going to start a church, like I had just finished he was the last pastor I did ministry with, and loved the way that he loves Jesus and the way that he honors people and works with people. And so I like Kate and I, my wife, we came out to Phoenix. we're technically like in Arizona I came from, so it wasn't a new state for me or it wasn't too like, oh, like I've never lived there before. So it was like a familiar place for me to like visit and see if I want to like live. And then Brian and Kristen had like laid out like what they felt like the Lord was wanting like them to do, and it sounded like a amazing opportunity to do ministry with them again, and to kind of like find like my church love and my coffee love and kind of it be in one umbrella. And like that's part of like Brian was like, hey, we want to start a coffee shop, and you like have a lot of experience in that and have like worked in that for a long time, and we also want you to lead worship because we definitely like work well together in that space. And after Kate and I like prayed about it, we just felt like it was like a really good thing, and just kind of felt like the Lord was in that, and we moved. It was hard to move, but it was good. It was a good move, and I've learned so much and grown so much in these last 4 years I've been out here, so it's been cool.
Yeah, and kind of to what you had talked about, I would love to hear from either of you. One question I have is the story behind Union. And maybe this is a Brian question, what inspired you to name your church Union? What is that really rooted in? And then the second kind of follow-up question with that is, why open up a coffee shop alongside a church? What kind of the purpose behind that, and what has that been for your church? So I don't know who wants to go first. But.
Jon, you want to go or you want me to go?
Yeah, I can speak on that a little bit and you can wrap it up.
Okay.
I think like the idea like of Union, and like similar to like our logo is like a U, but it's like kind of like a lot of puzzle pieces kind of put together that create a U. And like that was a very intentional kind of logo, as far as like, I think as people who follow Jesus and want to do ministry, we want to and need to be people who show and live out inclusion and invite people to who Jesus is. And so as far as like why the name and why it became like Union, a big part of that I think was like we wanted to unite people together and to Jesus. And I think that was like just like the right fitting name that the Freys had like felt like the Lord wanted to have them call the shop and the church and everything like that. And I think as far as like having a coffee shop, like as a church plant, I mean, at first we were just in Brian's house. Like we didn't have a good space for people who started the church plant to like go and hang out. Like it would be weird to just go in their living room in the middle of the day and just be like, we just want to hang out, you know, like they needed to have their own space at home, and we needed a space as a congregation to be able to hang out and meet. And so in some ways it was like a space for the people who were going to church, but it was also a space for our community to just like have. And we went back and forth between like, do we find a building and put the church and the coffee shop in it, and back and forth between like having it separate and having a church space separate. And I think like as we were thinking about that and like finances, but also just like the idea of like, do we want this to be a place that limits or hesitates people from coming in because maybe we're like a church coffee shop, and that's not bad to be a church coffee shop, but like, is there a small percentage of people in the world that might feel a little hesitation about just coming and grabbing a cup of coffee because they don't want to be preached at or whatever, or like limit people from being there? And like, I think that in itself is the opposite of what we wanted Union to be in general. And so like, I think that's kind of why we wanted to create like a separate space in our community for people to gather and hang out and just enjoy some good coffee. And if awesome conversations happened about Jesus, that was great. And if they didn't, that was great too. But yeah, so, I mean, Brian, if there's anything I left out.
No, you did great, dude. I mean, I think, I don't know what else to add other than just to reiterate one of our, primary dreams and missions, just being inclusivity and being invitational within that. And so it's amazing to have a space where we're serving the community, and it's not, people, there's a decent amount of people that know now that the shop is connected to some kind of church, but there's no church paraphernalia anywhere. And that's intentional. Not that if somebody owns a coffee shop and does that, that's not bad, like Jon said, but really the intentionality is to create a hospitable place. So if somebody has had a bad experience with church or with church people, we want it to still be hospitable for them as well, and maybe have a different experience with us than maybe they've had in the past for whatever reason, whether it's their lens or something painful happened. So it's great. It's also unique and great to kind of be coffee shop owners, and I don't know, for Jon as the roaster, to be in a community in a different way. It's been easier to have conversations with people who are maybe more anti-church, being a small business owner in the community. They're not as put off by, oh, well, you're just a pastor or whatever. Not just, but I hope you guys know what I mean. Like, there's baggage attached at times to being a pastor, and so along with just media baggage and all kinds of things. So that has been cool to have been open to some conversations that maybe I would not have been invited to. So that's been nice. It's been great to serve people even just a cup of coffee. It's definitely the long game. It's not the short game in terms of getting to know people. One cup of coffee at a time is like the marathon of getting to know people. It's not deep and quick, but it is still meaningful, and so yeah, that stuff comes to my mind as well.
Awesome. We have some awesome pictures to share, and I'm going to kind of go through them here. And I'm wondering, Brian, as I do, I would love to know, I mean, Jon mentioned you started you started in your home, and I know you're not there now. I think right now with COVID being the way it is, I would love to hear, number one, where were you worshiping before COVID? Were you still worshiping at your house, or did you go somewhere else? And how has COVID really influenced the work of the church? How is the community now? Yeah, so, and as you talk, I'll kind of go through some of these pictures.
Yeah, I mean, first space being in our home. I think if I were to go back in time, we were juggling so many things, and we've never done this before. So we ended up doing that's a picture of where we met right before COVID happened. We rent out space from a church, and we meet on Sunday nights. Mainly, not necessarily because we don't fit in the shop, in the main space of the shop. We could do a worship service in the shop up to probably about 40 to 50. And right before COVID, we were typically like 50 to 60. So we might have been able to smash in there. That is a picture of, we were in a school for a little while right after my home. So that was where we were right after being in my home. And we moved primarily because we had kids in small bedrooms, and it was getting really hard to do kids ministry well. And, the kids were just, and our volunteers were having a hard time and just doing that thing in bedrooms. So moved to the school, and then we switched over to the church because schools out here are actually really expensive to rent. So we saved money switching to the church. But I think originally, if I could go back in time, we picked a space for the coffee shop that was not quite big enough for the church and then maybe too big and too expensive for the shop. So if I could go back in time, I would either pick a smaller space that would just be for the shop, or I would pick a little bit bigger space so that we could accommodate some children's ministry stuff, some more children's ministry stuff actually within the shop, so the shop could be the shop and it could function better with the church, if that makes sense. So, but it is what it is. We made the best decision that we could at the time. And so, the shop can't really accommodate our church with children's ministry. It could just do adults, but we don't have any space for the kids. This is a picture of something that we did before COVID. Once a month, we did all church dinners in place of our worship service, because we're just trying to lean and force ourselves to be as intentional with relationships as possible. So it's a spiritual worship event when we come together and break bread together and eat together and look in each other's eyes and tell jokes and see how each other's actually doing, instead of just always coming together and kind of consuming a worship service and then leaving and getting back to all the other things that we have in our lives. So that's something that we did once a month that I loved. So yeah. Anything else you want me to mention within that, Chelsea? Did I forget something?
No, I think you did a great job. Thank you. And then another question, and I think I can move to some of the coffee shop pictures that we have here as well. Jon, hearing from you just kind of about maybe what types of things have you done in the coffee shop as well that you've opened up to the community? I think that having this coffee shop as a space that it doesn't look like a church, it is a space of community for church to come, but then for also anybody who wants to be welcomed in and have those spaces for conversation, I think is really great. And I'd love to kind of know some of the things that you have done as you've moved through that community space.
Yeah, I mean, just as far as like having the shop open, I feel like it creates a lot of that opportunity in itself, just like it living and breathing and doing its thing. Other areas where I think that we've done little extra things that are fun, we did a cupping series where we like helped our community try to get a little bit more acquainted with coffee and where it's from and how we bought it and how we came to buy it, and kind of ways to drink the coffee and taste the coffee and how to brew that coffee better at home. And so we did some cupping series where we would find a couple coffees and we would learn how to just drink them, and we'd talk about our producers and our farmers and kind of gave as much information about that we could for like a little baby shop like us that is still too small to like go to a farm, but able to buy coffee from people who we really trust and love, that like make sure that they buy the right kind of coffee at the right price from the right people. And so we were able to like dabble in that for a while, and those were on a class base. So people would sign up and then I would teach those classes. And so we would do those like once a month, and we did that for like a year, where we would just like rotate people in and out of like coming in. And sometimes like we would do like these 3 coffees for these 3 months, and then we'd have new coffees come in and we do new coffees. And so that was like another way that we tried to get a little bit more of a community base and a little bit more activity and physical, like sensory stuff, with people who felt like they wanted more from their coffee than just drinking it. And so that was really fun to do, and I really enjoyed kind of running those things.
I also have maybe one more question before we move into the cold brew series, where we're going to hear a little bit about how to make some cold brew. I know I've heard it's 112 degrees in Arizona, so we're going for the iced coffee as opposed to the hot coffee right now. But one more question for you guys from me, and then I would love to again invite you all into the chat box. And if you have any questions about union, about anything like that right now, would love to answer those right now. But my question for you is, as far as Point Loma and your experience as a student of Point Loma and as an alum of Point Loma, what that community has looked like. I'm curious how Point Loma has shaped kind of this journey into starting union, yeah, if you want to kind of share a little bit about that, we would love to hear. From either one.
Me or you, Hona?
Well, I'll just say something. So I think like my experience at Point Loma was one of like good community. And I think like it's a place that fosters that. And I met my wife there, and I have a lot of really deep friends that are from there, and got to really take advantage of like that small school like vibe that like really kind of, it was hard not to be close to people just because our classes were small, like everything was small. It made it really easy for that. So as that was like a daily thing that was ingrained in me, I think like as I am doing church ministry and also just like life ministry, that idea of like, I want to be super close with people and foster good relationships with people and learn to love on people and stick with people. And I think like that has been something that I feel like when I look back and I say, you know, that was a really good season of my life, and how can I take things that I've learned from there and move them into my everyday life. And so, yeah.
Nice. I think for me, I mean, relationships for sure, but I also think the professors that I had and the mentors that I had at Point Loma were not necessarily stuck in a rut with how they thought about ministry or theology. They were not afraid of difficult conversations or maybe challenging conversations. And I think that really formed me to be open to be questioned, to be open to ask difficult questions, to be open even for like the coffee shop. There are people that have attended Point Loma that have really influenced me in terms of the way they think outside the box, and me finding like great encouragement and challenge with that, to do that in my own life. And the creativity at Point Loma is huge just across the board in general. So just being around very creative people makes somebody like me who's maybe not as creative want to be, and kind of lean into the little ways that I am. And so, you know, I think of that stuff. I think of psychology professors bringing in Christian perspectives in creative ways to the area of counseling and the theology within that, and just some of my favorite conversations and favorite classes. And so, so yeah.
That's awesome. And I think like to kind of tag on to what you were saying, Brian, like I think the creativity is of what you've done at Union is so unique, and that's why we've been really excited to have you both here today to share, because I think, you know, a coffee shop looks like typically a, you know, secular environment, or, you know, not necessarily something you would say, oh, you're connected with the church, and having that be a space where you can welcome people and welcome people to have the conversations and ask the questions, or just come for a cup of coffee because that's what they want, you know, but you're creating that space. And I think that's really awesome. So we're excited. I've been personally excited to kind of see this journey for both of you from afar, from San Diego and nice 70-degree weather, but sorry. No, but really, really awesome. And so, yeah, I think we would love to hear a little bit about, I think Jon is probably taking over for this cold brew process. We're going to hear about that. I think cold brew is probably a hot ticket item for you guys right now. And yeah, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in on that chat. We will make sure that they get answered. So it could be about coffee too. It doesn't have to be, yeah, it can be about anything. So I'll toss it to Jon.
So we're gonna make a cold brew, and we're gonna do that because, like Chelsea said, it is super hot here. And there are a lot of different recipes on how you can make cold brew, and like I think that's like a fun journey in coffee, is being able to come up with different methods of or ways you want to brew your cold brew or any type of coffee. But we're gonna do this. I tried to make it as easy as I could as far as like what people might have around their house. So we are gonna show you, so I have one of these. It's like a cooking show. I'm really into this. So it's like, here we go. It's like, this is a French press. A lot of people use it for hot coffee. We're going to use it for a cold brew. And so there's this method, and then I started one that looks like in a mason jar, 32-ounce mason jar. And so the recipe that I have here is for a jar about this big. We can do them in both. So if the things that you kind of need are like French press and just kind of have these steps. So we're going to do, so we do a 7-to-1 ratio. And so for this 32-ounce or 25-ounce, 25-ounce like small jar that you want to make your cold brew in, like if you're just at home, you do like 700 grams of water or 25 ounces. And then we would do 100 grams or 3.5 ounces of coffee. And so you would mix that all in. If you did it in a French press, I would just throw it all in and set it on my counter. Or some people put it in the fridge, but I usually just keep mine right on my counter. And then I will let them submerge and be there for 24 hours. And then I'd use, so if you're gonna do the French press method, I would use like a coffee filter to pour my coffee through, because you'll be able to plunge. This is funny because it's like on here. So you can plunge, but you're still gonna get sediment and some grounds that come through. And so you can use a coffee filter to drain it and strain it. And so our coffee, another reason why cold brew is really great is because if you don't have, you can use pretty much any grinder because you want to get your coffee as coarse as possible. And so I can kind of allows people, they kind of have a grinder usually, and sometimes it's a blade grinder and sometimes it's a burr, but for this method, I think you'll be fine with both. And so this is, I kind of feel like I made this today, and then I have another one, like, you know, when you like put the muffins in and then on a cooking show they say, and this is how they look. So I have, this is how it looks. And so then you will pull out, I have a coffee bag. I have a filter with coffee inside this jar, if you could see it there. So you'll pull that out, and then you'll have your container of cold brew, and you can put this in the fridge after you brew it for 24 hours, and you can drink it straight, and you can dilute it with water or milk. And so we do a 1-to-1 ratio here, and either dilute it with milk or water. And that's a quick and easy way to make a tasty cold brew at home. And yeah, that was it.
John, I love your cooking show skills. That was amazing. You were even prepared ahead of time. Amazing. We will definitely make sure, John, this is the recipe that I can send everybody, right? That's on the screen right now.
Yeah, and so I sent it like this, and that way, because I didn't know what people were gonna make it with. I didn't know what they had. You can use a bowl and still strain it through that coffee filter. If you want to use a vase, anything to put all that water in. But I wanted to make sure to give you that ratio, that 7-to-1, and you can do your water and coffee ratio depending on how much you're gonna brew.
Cool. That's awesome. Kimberly said, do you start the French press process with hot water, so boiling water, and then let sit for 24 hours?
Thank you. So there are a couple different methods. There's some that I just learned recently. There's a really fun version that you can do with a little hot water first, but just to make it the easiest way possible, you can use room temperature water. And like I would say, get water from like a water from a grocery store or some type of bottled water, just so that like you're drinking the best water you can have with your coffee. And so you'll just use room temp water, would be probably the easiest way to go. And yeah, so just room temp water.
Curious if you have a favorite thing on the menu, because I know you guys maybe tend to rotate out some things. Do you have anything else? I know obviously cold brew is definitely on there now. Any other like favorites?
Yeah, I mean, I am a sucker for just like a good morning cup of coffee. So we have like 2 coffees that I'm really excited about. I really like the Colombian that we have, and I'm always a big fan of pretty much any Ethiopian coffee. They're super good. And so I would just have a good cup of coffee in the morning, and then usually in the afternoon, I'll do a cold brew. I've been drinking a lot of cold brew and lemonades because it's hot and that's refreshing to me. So that's super tasty. I enjoy that. But yeah, for me, that's that. Brian?
I love our espresso. I know I'm biased, but John's roasting is amazing. So right now, and probably year round, I don't really do hot drinks because I grew up in Arizona. But I do 2 shots over ice, and then I'll throw in a tiny bit of something else, depending on the day. But right now, we have a pine berry soda. So we have like a cold brew with tonic water and then pine berry, and it's just a strawberry, but it's a little different. That's super good. That's something that we have right now that we don't normally have, that I like.
That sounds delicious. I think we maybe have some Arizona people here who would be driving far to come get some.
I mean, you're welcome. You're gonna have to drive everywhere in Arizona.
I would.
Driving.
Yeah. We have one other question. I'm curious if the coffee shop is open now during this season, and what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so in Arizona, restaurants are open, but it's social distancing in restaurants, and then all of the workers are masked. So we are open on the inside. We have table seating outside, but it's so hot, hardly anybody ever sits there right now. But we do have some seating on the inside, but our tables are 6 feet apart, and then all of our staff is always masked up. And most people wear masks to the counter, and then when they're sipping their cup of coffee or whatever at the tables, they'll take them off and put them back on, or they'll just take them off, and then when they get up to leave, they'll put them back on for the most part.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel, maybe this is just one other question to follow up off of that, is, what are some ways that you have really had to, we always just use the word pivot. It's kind of a token term right now, but curious, both for the church and the coffee shop, what are some ways that you've been able to still maintain your mission and values through COVID?
John, you want to go, or you want me to start?
You can start.
as a church, we have decided to not do, we haven't had a single worship service for 4.5 months, which I think is not, I'm assuming it's not as unusual in California, but I do think it's on the more unusual side in Arizona. We're trying to do that to care for our people, but also the people that our people are around who may be more at risk. We have some family members who are older or who are sick. And so, you know, that's something that we've just decided to do, but we have a small group opportunity on Sunday nights that I lead. It's not a service, but it's just a small group for people who feel comfortable. We're all masked up when we do that on Sunday nights. And it's just been super small, less than 10 people, a handful of people. But then we're doing a full, as best we can, our version of a full worship service online. So that was a huge learning curve. I didn't know anything about that stuff. And so that was really rough at first, but I'm kind of in a rhythm right now. And on the coffee shop side, you know, all these decisions have been super challenging. So it's been great to stay open the whole time and be able to pay our employees the whole time during COVID. We've been very grateful for that. There was a chunk of time where our seating was not open and it was just takeout. But we went back to seating, kind of separated seating. And, you know, honestly, any decision is not perfect, and we're just trying to do the best we can and offer as safe of a place as we can for our people while still be able to take care of our employees and stuff. So it's just been super challenging. I don't know, you know, maybe some others might think that we've done it wrong, and they might be right, because I don't know that there's a perfect decision in the midst of COVID. It's just tough. Mm-hmm. So we're doing the best we can. But so yeah, Jon, yeah. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think you said it all. That's good.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you're right, Brian. I think that's like doing the best you can in the situation that you have, and I think it's really cool to hear that. And Kimberly said, one other question we just love to ask as pastors, would love to hear how you feel as the church and all Christ followers can practically embody and promote unity during a really kind of divisive time in the world. If you have any insight on that.
Okay, Jon, you go first on this one, if you want, if you have something you want to share.
I think as there happens and there could be a lot of division and splitting in the season that we're in. I think like as pandemic and in the pandemic, I think my focus will always be on who Jesus is, how he responds, how he communicates, how he includes. I think that will never change. Doesn't matter in what scenario I'm at. And that doesn't always mean that I have to agree with everybody, but it also doesn't mean that I have to just lay into people. And so I think as someone who works for the church, but also just as someone who just like wants to follow who Jesus is, like regardless if I go to church or not go to church, I think I want to be kind to people and I want to love on people and include people. And so that'll always be kind of my lens that I try to like do my life through. And try to focus as best as I can on how do I respond in a way that Jesus can be seen through this, and just kind of, and sometimes I'm better at it than others, but I think that'll just always remain my focus. And like, I will try to communicate in the most including, kindest way that I can. And maybe that's not saying anything. And maybe that's just being like, I'm just gonna not respond, and I'm gonna just listen, and I'm going to hear you out, and kind of process it and figure it out for myself, and then maybe come back to you later, or maybe it's just easier to have a good communication and good conversation with people. But I think that finding that like lens of who Jesus is, I don't think will change for me depending on what's happening around me. And so I guess that's how I'm trying to figure out how to not be divisive in the world.
John, so good. I say amen to that. I think our lens as a little church is trying to, throughout the year, help people notice that Jesus is interacting with people of other races and other cultures and other positions and other politics and other religious stances, and noticing that and really talking about that and wrestling with that, and then to lean into how he responded, so that our position or our take on being a Christian, on our world, is not as much influenced by checking American Christian boxes, even though some of those are good and beautiful. Some of them kind of aren't, but really wrestling with the life and love of Jesus himself as he interacted with people whom I'm sure he would have disagreed with on some things, as he interacted with people who were offended by him, as he interacted with people who were trying to get him to twist his words and get him into trouble, watching who he is, and just as imperfect as I am, as we are trying to lean into that, while still, trying to be love, a Jesus kind of love, a sacrificial kind of love, a serving kind of love, a listening kind of love. I mean, we don't do it perfect by any stretch, but, I think when I hear John talk about a Jesus lens, I think of those things. And then I think of kind of the Apostle Paul saying, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. And I've been thinking about that a lot recently, how many of us have our knowledge and we're so right. And then we put all of the opinions online that back us, and that makes us feel even more right. But man, if I'm gonna be something, I want to be something having to do with love, and not just because I can be right and still be wrong. I think the Apostle Paul would say, if I'm not loving somebody in the midst of my rightness, if my theology doesn't help me love better, then I don't know what it's for. So if my stance doesn't help me love better, then what is it good for? So just really trying to hang on to that as I want to be right, as I have my opinions, as I have my stances and my stuff. I'm trying to default to that, and I'm not perfect in it, but I'm wrestling with those things in my own little heart and mind. So that's what comes to mind.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you both for being just open and sharing your experience through this time, through the last few years, and your journey. And we are really thankful that you joined us today and shared. So I hope you all were able to really just learn something from this this hour we had together today. Thank you so much for joining us, and again, thank you to Brian and John for all of your insight and all of the conversations that we were able to have today. This is the very last Loma talk of our current season, our series season that we did in the summer, and so we're really thankful that they joined us, and we plan to do more. Right now we have the academic school year beginning, and it will begin virtually, and excited for what is in store, and also appreciate prayers from everybody as Point Loma enters into this new season as well. So Yeah, without further ado, I'm going to have us conclude here. We'll make sure to send this. I will keep this up for just a minute, this recipe, if you want to screenshot it, but also I will get that out in an email. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Brian and John. This was awesome. And I hope you all have an amazing rest of your Wednesday and an amazing rest of your week. Thank you for coming.